Hi and welcome to Craggle. We develop tools for the visual effects industry. This is a documentation video on smartMedia, our multi-threaded media converter, ingestion and delivery tool that runs standalone and inside Nuke. It lets you convert image and video-based content from one format into another. smartMedia uses Nuke under the hood to convert your media. Due to Nuke's node-based workflow, this means absolute control for your media conversions, and due to that, smartMedia goes way beyond a traditional media encoder. And it is fully customizable to your needs. smartMedia contains a lot of features that we'll be exploring in just a minute. But before, please note that our written documentation is the primary reference for smartMedia. It contains in-depth information about everything you need to know about smartMedia and all its advanced workflows. In order to keep this tutorial at a reasonable length, there are several features that we can only show you briefly in here. For in-depth information, please have an additional read on our written documentation. So first, let's install smartMedia, and then let's explore all of its features. Like any other Craggle product, smartMedia can be installed with Craggle Connect directly inside Nuke. For more information about Connect, please visit the link below. So open Connect and drag smartMedia to the right to reveal more information. Just click on Buy and you'll be located to the webpage where you can purchase smartMedia. After purchasing, you receive a mail including an install code. Now simply click on Install, enter your received install code or use your Craggle account credentials, and smartMedia will be installed automatically on your machine. After the installation is finished, smartMedia can be accessed via Nuke's menu bar. Just click on Craggle, and in here you will now find a new submenu smartMedia. And here you can open smartMedia. Let's now have a look how smartMedia works. In the first part of this tutorial, we'll use smartMedia in standalone mode, so outside of Nuke. Note that inside of Nuke it looks and works the same. Now, running smartMedia in standalone mode requires either Python 2 or Python 3, and PySite or PySite 2 installed on your machine. Please have a read at our documentation, where we give an in-depth instruction how to install these requirements in case you don't have them installed on your machine. To launch smartMedia in standalone mode, let's navigate to our smartMedia installation, then your Python version, and in here you'll find the standalone folder. Click the batch file for your current operating system. The first time you launch smartMedia in standalone mode, you'll be asked to set a Nuke executable. This occurs only when running in standalone mode. This step is required to set up once so that smartMedia knows where it can find Nuke. Nuke is required for smartMedia as it uses Nuke for rendering your tasks. You can always add additional Nuke executables afterwards in the settings and switch between these if needed. So browse to your Nuke executable and click OK. You're now ready to go. Before converting media, let's first get some sources into smartMedia. To do that, simply drag and drop one or multiple media files into smartMedia. You can drop folders with any nested folder structure into smartMedia, and it will scan your dropped folders for media and ingest these automatically for you. When ingesting, smartMedia will collect all the source's metadata, render a thumbnail, and extract naming information that you can use down the line when rendering tasks. This will be discussed a bit later. You can feed any media that Nuke can read and write. So for example, you can ingest and render image sequence file types like EXR, TIFF, DPX, JPEG, PNG, Cineon, HDR, and so on, but also videos like RAD, MP4 or H.264, ProRes, DNX HD, uncompressed, and so on. All ingested media gets listed in the jobs list. Each media gets shown in one row and contains a thumbnail, the source's base name, and some metadata. Let's hover over one source and press Alt and I to show all metadata of that source. Let's make some space and concentrate on the first item. Use the slider at the top right to increase or decrease the size of all sources. You can double-click the title of any item to toggle between hiding or showing it. Or click the View toggle on the left. To toggle all sources, navigate to View, Contract all jobs. A job is a source and all its tasks. We'll have a closer look on tasks in just a minute. Double-click the title of the first item to expand it so that we can now concentrate on this item. The list of media can be saved so that you can come back to it at a later stage and switch between lists of media. Click File, Save As. Browse to a folder where you want to save this media to and set a name. To load the media list, choose File, Open, and browse to your .media file. Or load it straight away from the Open Recent list. Or simply drop your .media file into smartMedia. smartMedia works with the concept of adding tasks to your sources. Each task converts your source into one specified format. Let's, for example, create a half-res JPEG proxy for our source. For that, create a new task by clicking the plus button on the right. Or simply hover over your source and press the plus button on your keyboard. A new task gets created below your source. Each source can have as many tasks as you like. smartMedia ships with a handful of presets that you can use right away. Later, we see how to create new presets. For now, let's use a pre-built preset. Here you can choose a preset. Choose Proxy JPEG Half-Res. As soon as you select the preset, everything gets set up automatically for you based on how a preset has been configured. By default, all presets render next to the source. Later, we see how to change this. Next to the preset drop-down menu, you see the output name of your file. Hover over it to see the absolute path where this task will render to. If you want to render to a different path, click the file name in the middle. This opens a browser that lets you browse to a new location. Let's leave the path as is and render next to our source. To kick off a rendering, click the Render button on the right. The job renders in the background and shows your progress. Once the rendering has finished, it shows you a green finished status. From here, you can now reveal the rendering by clicking the Reveal button next to the green finished status. Or right-click the task and choose Reveal Output from the context menu. The shortcut is Alt and O. The context menu offers more features, which we'll see later in more details. Just as a quick example, you can also send the rendering straight to RV or any other media player like DJV. After having created one proxy, let's now see how we can quickly set up and render many tasks for multiple sources inside smartMedia with minimum effort. Let's create full-res proxy JPEG files for all of our sources inside a dedicated proxy folder that sits next to our source. As we've previously seen, we could click the plus button for each and every source and select the needed preset. But there's a shortcut. Navigate to Task, New Preset for all sources. The upcoming dialog lets you add a selected preset to all sources. Select the preset Proxy JPEG Full-Res and click Add. The Proxy JPEG Full-Res preset was now added to all sources. Next, let's set up the render destination. As previously seen, we could now enter a render path for each and every output. But there is a quicker way. smartMedia offers an output route feature that you can use to bulk set up render locations to render into the same location for all sources, or to bulk set up render paths relative to the source. Note that executing the output route feature, this would change the render location for all active tasks. That is, also for our previously rendered task. We have different options now how to handle that. We can either remove the task when we no longer need it. This gets done by right-clicking it and choosing Remove from the context menu. Note that this will not delete the rendered file. It will simply remove the task folder which produced that rendering. We'll later have a closer look on task folders. Alternatively, we can lock the task, which we'll do now. By locking a task, we exclude it from any changes so that no further changes will apply until we unlock it again. For that, right-click the finished task and choose Lock from the context menu. The task is now locked, which gets indicated by this red lock symbol. With that, it cannot be altered anymore and the output path won't change. To unlock the task, simply click the red lock again. Now that we have locked our previously finished task, we are ready to use the output route functionality to bulk set up all render paths at once. Navigate to the rectangle next to the magnifying glass at the top. Click the rectangle. In the drop-down menu, you can choose from creating a new output route, delete the currently selected, and select relative and absolute output routes. By default, smartMedia offers a relative output route labeled ... /proxy. This will go up one directory from the source, which means ... and then use a folder called proxy. Let's create a new relative path that renders into a folder full as JPEG next to the source. For that, click New in the drop-down menu. In the upcoming dialog, make sure to have the relative checkbox checked since we want to bulk set up output paths relative for each source. In the path field, enter ... full res JPEG and click Create. The new output route is now available in the drop-down menu. Activate it. Since this will change all output paths for all active tasks, you will be asked to confirm that step. Click OK. The output paths get set up for each task and you're ready to render. Let's expand all jobs. Execute from smartMedia's menu bar. View, Expand all jobs. In order to bulk render all tasks, let's select all tasks by selecting Selection, Select All. This shows selection boxes for each task, which you can also toggle with this button. Uncheck our previously locked task. Finally, execute Selection, Render Selected. All tasks will be rendered into a full res JPEG folder next to their source. The proxies finish one after the other and are finally all finished. Let's use smartMedia inside Nuke to transcode our final EXR rendering as a DNx HD video that we can then send to our client. And let's add a slate and burn-in information to it and set a comment to describe the changes that we applied in our sent video. Select your rendered write node or a read node to transcode. Navigate to Nuke's menu bar and choose Craggle, smartMedia, send selected to smartMedia. Now please note that smartMedia always requires a physically available source file. You cannot send a write node to smartMedia that has not been rendered yet. smartMedia is a media converter and will not render your comp. If you need to speed up your rendering, we recommend our multi-threaded render tool smartRender. Clicking this command, the file gets ingested into smartMedia. Create a new task and select this preset, Deliver DNx HD 422. Each task contains several output details that you can edit to your needs. Click the arrow button on the left. This expands all details for the current task. By default, smartMedia shows all details. Now, depending on your needs, that is exactly what you need. But you can also hide certain details and update the order of these. Right-click inside the Details panel and choose Change Details Layout. In the upcoming window, you can turn on and off the visibility of certain details. And you can also update the order between these details. These changes apply to all tasks. By default, this preset renders a slate and burnins as indicated by the activated checkboxes. You can uncheck these if you don't need this. Since this is a client delivery, let's keep both checked. And let's also add a comment that gets shown in the slate. In the documentation, you can read on how to retrieve comments automatically from a database and populate them into that field. For now, let's add a comment manually. Set an output path and render the file. It contains a slate and burnins. And the slate shows our entered comment. smartMedia will inform you about tasks that did not render successfully. In this example, the status indicates failed. In order to see why it failed, click the job log button. The job log contains useful information about setting up the task and rendering it. In that example, the task failed due to frame 1005 that is missing. Now, that also depends on the file that actually rendered the file. So for example, if you have set up to skip missing frames, it wouldn't have failed. But that's all preset dependent. smartMedia contains 3 sections that you can access with these buttons. The job section, which we've already seen, the preset section, and the settings section. You can toggle between these using your keyboard. Ctrl 1 for the job section, Ctrl 2 for the preset section, and Ctrl 3 for the settings section. Let's now concentrate on the preset section. Here you see all presets. These presets live inside any of your configured preset root directories, which you can control inside the settings under the Paths tab. This gives you great flexibility as it means you can load and unload certain presets. As an example, you as a TD can set up and test a preset in a local path, and when it is ready, you can push it to a preset root directory on your server, so that everybody in your team can use it. Click this button to reveal the preset in your file explorer. We'll later have a look about all these files that make up a preset. Click the arrow button to edit the preset. Each preset contains and gets driven by a data dictionary, which we'll have a closer look later. Here you can adjust the preset directly. smartMedia ships with a handful of presets. In order to create a new preset, you can use our built-in preset wizard, which guides you through setting up your preset in several simple steps. You can then further adjust it if needed. For more in-depth information, please refer to our written documentation. Let's walk through the preset wizard to create a new final comp preset that converts our linear XR files back to DBX files using a delivery resolution of 2048 by 1152 in log format. Click the Continue button to start the preset creation. The preset information page asks you general information about the preset to create. Enter a name and a description. The description shows up in the task details so that everybody is aware what this preset is about. The reformat page asks you about reformatting the source to a specified format. Same as source, to use the same resolution as the source, that is, don't apply any reformat. Scale, to scale the source by a specified factor. Format, to use a specific format. And box, to use a specific width with auto-calculation of the respective height or force a specific width and height. So pretty much like the reformat node that we have inside Nuke. Since we want to render in a specific format, choose Format. The Format dropdown contains already a few common formats by default. But we can create a new format on the fly. Choose New. In the upcoming dialog, enter as follows. Delivery DNH as name for the format, 2048 pixels in width, and 1152 pixels in height with a pixel aspect ratio of 1. Click Create. The new format gets selected. Click the Continue button. In the time options page, you are asked about time-specific things. You can render using the same frame range of the source or force a specific frame as start frame. Let's keep same as source. The next page lets you add slates and burnins to your outputs. smartMedia ships with a slate and burnins node, but you can create additional ones and choose them here. How that works gets briefly shown later on and is documented in full detail in the advanced section of our written documentation. Since we want to render a preset for delivering final comp renderings back to our client, let's check slate so that we prepend a slate before the rendering but keep burnins unchecked. Again, as mentioned before, you can always change this afterwards at any time if needed. On the next page, we get asked about the file type and output color space. Choose DPX. In the color space dropdown, type C. From the suggestions, choose compositing log. You can also enter anything else, and you're not restricted to the suggestions in here, of course. On the next page, you get asked if smartMedia should generate a template.nk file automatically, or if you would like to use the template.nk file from the default preset. The template.nk file is the file that will get populated with your task data. Generating a minimal template.nk file from code is fine for now. Let's leave it at generate template. Now the final page lets you automatically create blueprints to use for code injections in various locations. For example, as soon as you apply a preset and before and after rendering. You can use these injections to basically do whatever you want. As an example, you could call your database for additional information to pipe into your task to render. Update your database, copy some files, write emails once rendering has finished, and do much more. We will later have a brief look how this works. This feature gets fully documented in our written documentation inside the advanced section. Let's leave the choice at no for now and not inject any custom code into our preset. Finally, click Done. The preset was successfully created. Now we can use it right away. Navigate back to the job section, so hotkey Ctrl and 1. Create a new task for any source, and choose the newly created preset from the presets drop-down menu. You can always click the arrow on the task's left to adjust the task to your needs if required. As previously mentioned, you can further adjust the generated template itself if needed. Please refer to our written documentation, which goes more into detail about this topic. Here you can also read about how to use preset root directories to share presets in your team and how to create your own slates and burnins and how to get them discovered by smartMedia. Let's now have a look at a few important settings. Click the Settings button or use the shortcut Ctrl and 3. The settings are split into 3 sections, which you can access with these 3 buttons. General, which contains a variety of general settings to adjust smartMedia to your needs. Paths, which contains everything that is path related in smartMedia. And naming, which lets you set up the naming extraction rules for your sources. Please note that changing some settings require a restart of smartMedia. Please refer to the tooltips to find out which settings widget requires that. Let's talk about some important settings in the General tab. Here you can turn on and off tooltips for all major widgets. Here you can let smartMedia automatically load the previous saved working state when launching it. If you prefer an empty session without any sources, simply uncheck this checkbox. Here you can set the number of recent files to show in the Files Open Recent menu. As mentioned, smartMedia works multi-threaded. It ingests and renders media in parallel threads. Here you can set up the amount of threads to use. Now if you have many of them, you can increase this value to your needs. When ingesting new media, do you prefer to list them at the top or at the bottom of the jobs list? Here you can adjust this to your needs. Here you can set up to use the sources first, middle or last frame as the thumbnail. The last setting in here might get interesting for you once you start to have many presets. By default, we don't use auto-completion in the preset dropdown. However, when changing it to completer and restarting smartMedia, then you can click any task's preset dropdown on the left and enter the preset name you would like to apply. A completer shows you all available presets with your entered characters. And you can still click the right-hand side of the drop-down menu to scroll through the list of available presets. Let's have a quick look at the Paths section. This section contains all path-related settings. Here you can set up the Nuke executables that smartMedia uses to generate metadata and thumbnails for your sources, as well as rendering your tasks. If your presets need to render using specific Nuke versions, then you can define these here, and using the favorite button sets a specific executable as default in case it is not otherwise specified explicitly in any preset by using the Nuke_version key. For more information on that, please refer to our written documentation. As previously seen, here we can point smartMedia to several folders that contain presets. You can then load and unload presets root directories in here. Next, you can add several node root folders. These are folders that contain .nk files, which will be discovered by smartMedia. As an example, any .nk file that contains slate or burnins in their file name will be listed in the presets creation wizard so that you can choose your custom slates and burnins. In order to keep this tutorial at a reasonable length, we also refer to our written documentation if you would like to find out more about this feature. Finally, here you can set where smartMedia will write all data which smartMedia generates for all tasks. In most cases, you're fine to keep this path at this default, but if required, you can change it here if needed. Let's now have a brief look at the naming section. Whenever you ingest media in smartMedia, it will try to split off naming values by patterns that you define in here. In many cases, a file path contains certain information. For example, the name of the show, the sequence and the shot, and more. Here you can define as many regular expression patterns as you like, which run when ingesting data. But you can also split off naming values at any time for any given source. Navigate back to the Jobs section and click the Naming button. Here you can directly choose a pattern to apply for naming extraction. In this case, we use this pattern to split off these naming values. These naming values can then be used for path assembly and inside slates and burnins. For more information on that, please also refer to our written documentation. In the last section of this tutorial, let's have a brief look on some advanced features. Here are just a few things to quickly show you so you're aware what smartMedia offers you. Now again, in order to keep this tutorial at a reasonable length, please refer to our written documentation for more information on any of these advanced features. You can inject and run custom code in several events. For example, when applying a preset and before and after rendering. All you have to do to make this happen is adding one or several of the following files into your preset. Data.py to run code when applying your preset. pre_render.py before rendering your task. And post_render.py after your task has finished rendering. Now there are many advantages what you can do with that. All in all, this mechanism gives you maximum control over your tasks. For example, you can perform complex path assembly for your render paths, read and write data from and to your database, and automatically send emails, just to name a few. Please have a look at the dev preset that ships with smartMedia, and also have a look at our written documentation if you want to find out more about this functionality. Just to show you very briefly, here we have an example preset that would automatically populate the comment field from a comment that comes from a database. You can set up logic if needed and directly see the changes by clicking the Reload button without the need to relaunch smartMedia and reselect the template. So this makes editing your data.py file super quick and responsive. Each task contains several files to render a task. Right-click a task and choose Reveal Task. The shortcut is Alt and T. This reveals the task's data folder, which contains the following files. A data.json file. This file contains key value pairs that describe how the task should be rendered. It contains many values that get interpreted by the smartMedia translator, which translates a key value pair into an actionable item. The render log. This file contains the render log that was created when rendering the task. It contains valuable information about what was happening when rendering your task. Then there's the template.nk file. Now, this is a raw file from your preset. This file will be populated by the smartMedia translator in order to change it to the structure of the render.nk file, so the file that contains the actual source and everything else needed to create the final render result. So then there's the render.nk file, and this is the actual file that produces the final rendered result. It contains the node structure from the template.nk file, but with everything translated so that it is ready to be rendered. Note that you can always perform any last-minute changes to this file and render it manually if needed. And as previously mentioned, there are several other files to inject code. So the data.py file, and as touched briefly in the last section, the data.py file handles injecting any code when applying a preset. Then the pre-render file, which gets automatically executed before rendering your task. And the post-render file to execute custom code after the render is finished. Let's now have a quick look at the data.json file. As previously mentioned, each task gets described with task data, which is a dictionary of key value pairs. These get interpreted by the smartMedia translator to create actionable items. But you can also add any additional key value pair in here to drive your render.nk file. By the way, you can also navigate over any task and press Alt and I to quickly show all data as well. Once you launch any render.nk file, as long as it has a data.json file located right next to it, all the data will be available inside Nuke in a global data dictionary. This information can and will, for example, drive your burnins and slates. But you can also set up switch nodes to drive them by this data. So this gives you a maximum of flexibility. This feature gets also further discussed in our written documentation. Now, while working on new presets and while debugging tasks, it might be desirable to set up everything but without actually rendering your data. For that, you can right-click and choose Setup Only, or use the shortcut Alt and R. You can then reveal the task data and launch the render.nk file. This is also useful in some occasions where you would need to perform any last-minute changes to your task's render.nk file, and then simply rendering it manually yourself. smartMedia lets you run custom functionality on any task output. For that, right-click any task and choose Custom Commands from the context menu. By default, smartMedia ships with 3 commands to send the rendering to the DJV player and to our replayer, and to copy the render paths to your clipboard. Now, for the first 2 commands, make sure the respective players are installed on your end and that you have set up the dedicated environment variables to point to the player executable files, so to tell smartMedia where to find these. For more information about that, please also refer to our written documentation. These were just a few advanced features. Keep in mind that smartMedia offers a lot more, which gets fully documented in our written documentation. And be sure that we'll also add additional features in the future. So please make sure to also have a look at our updates documentation page. So this was a documentation video on smartMedia, our multi-threaded media converter, ingestion and delivery tool that runs standalone and inside Nuke.